Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast today. And today's episode is all about EV road trip tips and tricks. If you haven't seen the last two episodes of the podcast, my family and I went on an EV road trip to and from South Carolina. So check out those videos if you haven't done so yet. And we thought after that video, let's get on and talk to you about some tips and tricks for your EV road trip. I'm joined by Sebastian from the Kilowatt Station today. Sebastian, how are you doing?
Great.
Great, that is awesome. So both of us have taken long and short EV road trips. Some of the things we are going to mention today are things that we do on almost all of our road trips. It's taking an EV road trip is not as easy as taking a road trip in a standard gasoline power vehicle. In a regular vehicle, you can stop every 2 or 3 exits, get gas, hop back on the freeway, no big deal. Taking a road trip in an EV does take some planning, both during the trip and before the trip. We all do it before we take an EV road trip. EV road trips can be done. It's not as difficult as you can see in the previous two videos of the podcast, episodes of the podcast. It can be done. It's very easily if you plan. So, and that's the key. So we're going to start talking about planning, what we do to plan, some resources we use to plan, and then just some tips and tricks that we use along the way. So first up, before you even hop in the car, you have to do some pre-trip planning. I know for me, I have a Tesla. Sebastian has a Chevy Bolt. We may do some of the similar things. We may do some things that are a little different. For me, what I normally do is I go to my app, my Tesla app, and I plug in exactly where I'm going. So I'm going to my parents' house in South Carolina. I type in the address, and I see within the app what stops I need to make to charge. So those of you who are not familiar with Tesla, if you get into the car and you type in where you're going, it will tell you exactly where you need to stop to charge, how long you need to charge, and exactly how much energy you will have when you get there. So it's done for you by the Tesla app. But I like to plan more than that. So what I like to do is kind of see where Tesla has mapped out where I'm going to stop. And then I also like to see what other superchargers are along the way in case something happens where there's a detour, there's a wreck, one of my kids has to go to the bathroom unexpectedly. I know, hey, there's some other stops here. I can also know the different type of superchargers. I know, for example, the one in Tupelo is horrible. It's in the back of a parking lot of a mall somewhere. There's no food or bathrooms or drinks anywhere within walking distance. And then I know the one that's in Leeds, Alabama is at a Buc-ee's where everyone loves to stop. So just pre-planning and knowing where I'm going to stop and what superchargers are along the way. Sebastian, what are some of the things that you do to plan for your trip before you even leave the house?
Yeah, so it's pretty similar, except for like in the case of the Chevy Bolt, there is no built-in route planning. So you kind of have to do it a little more manually. So I usually rely on two or three different apps. PlugShare, which is kind of the go-to app that every EV driver should just have, just for being able to see, where there might be a random level 2 charger or anything, just even close to where you live, even outside of the road trip context. Another super helpful app is called A Better Route Planner. Oftentimes it's just shortened to ABRP. And it is a highly customizable app where you can go in, you tell it, what you drive, and it has profiles for like every car. And then when you do that, it will automatically put in things like what the expected efficiency is of your vehicle at 65 miles an hour. And if you have their premium plan, it'll even like you can make routes, and it'll even take into account like weather. So if it knows it's going to be super cold, it will give you range estimates that more likely mimic that you're going to have less range because it's cold. Or on the flip side, when it's super, super hot and you're going to be, blasting AC the whole time. And then there's a lot of customization. Like if you're someone who wants to roll into a charger at 2%, you can tell it, my minimum charger SOC will be 2%, but maybe I want to get to the destination at like 30% so I can then just drive around. You can, you set all that. And then when you go in, you just tell it, I want to start here, go there, hit, start. It'll kind of do the route plan. And then, it'll show you, okay, your first stop, you're going to stop in Little Rock and you're going to charge for 25 minutes from 16 to 75%. And then the next. So anyway, it's really nice. Usually when I use it, I still combine it with PlugShare because, it might suggest a charger and then I go into PlugShare and find out that charger sucks. Or
Yes.
it's in the back of a parking lot and it's not near anything, or it's been closed for 6 months, stuff like that. So, it's always go through and double check. And that's another thing a better route planner will do, though, is you can go in and actually tell it you want to replace that charger. And then it'll show you it'll try to help you find chargers that are maybe close to it so you can stick to that original plan.
Yes, yeah,
Um,
PlugShare is great, and not only does it have level 3 chargers in there, but also has your standard level 2 chargers in there. Say, hey, I'm going to be going to the zoo while I'm at my destination. Does the zoo have chargers for me there? I'm going to the library. I'm going to the St. Louis Cardinals game. Does the parking lots have garages? And that's where I found those apps to be very helpful is for destination chargers. But yes, those are awesome as well. And not only I am a Tesla driver, but not only do I look for Tesla superchargers, but I also look for superchargers that are Electrify America, EV Connect, EV Go, because I need to know, hey, listen, I gotta have a backup plan. You could be on a trip, and it doesn't usually happen with Tesla, but boom, a whole charging station goes down. So what are my
mhm,
backups? If I'm at Bucky's, I know I can pop over to Electrify America stations, or the one in Leeds also have, I think, the Mercedes
mhm.
Benz chargers in them now too. So you have all those options. So these are all things that we suggest you do before you even get into your vehicle and start driving. I know people who create spreadsheets that have all the sites listed and how fast they charge and things like that to make their time more efficient. Another thing I suggest is if you're going to be spending the night somewhere, so you're breaking your trip up into 2 days. Hotel charging is something that you need to look into as well. I try to in every one of our trips try to book a hotel charger. I noticed that the area that we stay in Alabama, there's 3 hotels and there's 1 charger. And that's key because if you can start your day with 100%, I know for me and Sebastian talked about it with his Bolt, that's going to save me probably a stop along the way.
Mhm.
Because if I start with 80 or start with 70, I only have to go so far, I have to charge again. But if I start with 100, chances are I'm going to be able to miss a stop somewhere. And a lot of your local apps, like I know hotels.com and a lot of apps like that, will let you know if the hotels have charging stations in it. And then, like Sebastian says, go to PlugShare and see if they're actually working. So, what's your experience been with hotel charging? Do you kind of do the same thing?
Yeah, so very similar. We went to it was a shorter trip. We went to Memphis a couple weeks ago, and we booked a hotel based on the fact that it had a charger. We got there, pulled into the hotel at like 20%, woke up the next
Mm-hmm.
morning 100%. That made it to where we could go from Memphis back to Little Rock, without stopping. We didn't have to stop in
Yeah.
Forest City or anything like that. So hotel charging is definitely key. You do have to be careful sometimes with the hotels.com, or I think we used Expedia when we booked that one, because when we applied the EV charger filter, I noticed there were a couple hotels in the list that do not have chargers.
Oh,
So I don't
someone put them
know.
in there.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where you go to PlugShare and you say, okay, does this actually exist? Now, it's always possible. If the charger is new, no one's used it, no one's added it to PlugShare. But
Yeah.
I err more on the side that PlugShare is right versus the hotel being right. But yeah, in 100% though, if you can get to 100%, and even before you even leave for the trip, that night before, go in your car, take that 80% charge limit off, whatever, let it get to
Mm-hmm.
100%, because that ensures, your longest leg will always be that first basically stretch. Because after that, you're going to charge from maybe 10% to 60%, and then 20% to 50, just based
Yep.
on how the chargers are spaced out.
Yes, and that is key. I know people don't. I know a lot of people say don't charge your car daily to 100%. That is true, but if you're going on a trip, knock that up to 100%. Sometimes what I do, I don't like to sit at 100% for a while. So what I'll do is charge to like 90, 95%. When I get up the next morning, I'll set an alarm, bump it up to 100%, so it has an hour, or so, hour and a half charge to get up to 100%. So it's not sitting at that high state of charge for a long period of time. But anytime you can leave your destination with 100%, that is key. And like I said, it will probably save you a stop. And kind of like you said with those hotel chargers, what I've noticed on one of them, one was getting ready to be installed, but they went ahead and put it on there anyway, saying that it had a hotel charger and actually didn't. But that's where I go to
Yeah.
PlugShare and say, hey, does this have a charger and does it work and how fast is it and does anyone else use it or anything like that? So that's always key too. So some of the things I see that you listed here, ABCs. Tell us a little bit about that, Sebastian.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on it earlier. So ABC is always be charging. So basically,
Mm-hmm.
before you leave, and you think about, what are you going to do on the trip? Like you mentioned, are you going to go to the zoo? Are you going to go to a baseball game? Whatever. Look at PlugShare. See, are there any chargers close to where you're going to be? And if there are, there's no sense. You might as well go ahead and park there so you can plug in. That way, even if you're only there for an hour, you've added, maybe 20%, 30%. and that's just kind of helping you maybe then stretch to the next leg, just that much further. And so that's kind of, when my wife and I, when we go on our road trips and we look around, that's one of the things we're looking for is like, we were kind of looking, maybe we wanted to walk around at a downtown area. There's a parking garage here. They have a charger. We can park there and then walk and go, coffee shops or thrift stores or whatever else,
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
always be charging.
Yeah, because what you don't want to have to do is like the morning of go to a supercharger and sit there and charge, or before you come back that night, go to a supercharger, sit there and charge. I've had to do that before. It's not fun. I drop the family off the hotel, drive 2 miles down the road, sit at a supercharger. You're never going to get it to 100%. You're going to get to about 80, 85%, because after that, it just takes forever to get to 100. And then the next morning, you have to do the same thing. You have to stop at a supercharger, waste 15, 20 minutes there. It's always best. A lot of hotels now are going to have chargers in them or around them, or if you're going to like IKEAs, I know IKEAs have chargers in them, or a lot of your sporting events in the parking garages are going to have chargers in them. Just look around in that Plexure app and you will be able to find them. One of the things I noticed too in driving within different weathers, and you can kind of explain this a little bit too, especially because you're kind of like the tech guru with efficiency, is kind of know your efficiency. I know when I was coming back from South Carolina, the first part of the trip, it was cloudy and cool, and I was getting like 290, 300 watts per mile. It's like, oh, I'm doing good. I'm doing good now. It got sunny. Then we got to 340, 350. So you have to realize on EV road trips that the faster you go, the less efficient your car is going to be. Just the difference of driving 70 to 75 can change the efficiency on your car. The difference of a 10 mile per hour headwind and a 10 mile per hour tailwind, or a 95-degree day and an 80-degree day, can affect your efficiency. And the nice thing about the cars, a lot of the cars can adjust with that. They can see what's going on for efficiency and things like that. And like you said, a lot of the cars take that into account when you're traveling. They understand it's a cold day, or it's a hot day, or it's a windy day. You're going to take that into your account when you're going to a charger, saying, hey, we're going to keep you here a little longer, because you're going to need a little bit more energy to get to that next stop. So what's kind of been your experience with efficiency while driving?
Yeah, so I mean, you summed it up pretty well. You just, it's one of those things. It's really helpful to just know your car, right? When for me, my commute, is all, or at least currently is all interstate. So I know at 70 miles an hour, I usually on a good, I should get 3.8 miles to the kilowatt hour for, just kind of an example. So then I can kind of use that to hopefully kind of build out, like when I start looking at doing route plans or whatever, does that match? Does that kind of compare? And then that's, I mentioned a better route planner earlier. That's one of the things it takes into account too, since it does the weather projections and will take into account, there's headwind, tailwind, whatever. It can help kind of, point you into you might look at it and go, I feel like I can go further than that, but it probably knows something you're not realizing.
Yeah.
Like when we went there was not the last time we went to Memphis, but the time before that, I was getting in, we got to about Forest City, and all of a sudden there was a 25 mile an hour headwind. And it's just, I watched my efficiency just tank because I'm driving straight into a 25 mile an hour wind. There's nothing I could do about it, right? But I was at least able to, I made it, got to there. There's a level 2 charger where I was going, plugged in, did my thing. It wasn't a big deal, but, it was just stuff to take into account.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of people, when they get in their cars, my Tesla will say it's going to charge to, it's going to end my that part of the trip with like 12%. And then I'll see as I drive, wow, that goes up to like 18, 19, 20. I'm doing pretty good. So I lay on the gas, and then it starts coming back down again, and usually ends up around that 12, 13, 14%. And like especially know your car. I mean, if a lot of these cars are going to tell you to charge at a certain point while you're traveling, charge to that point. If you're not comfortable, stay an extra 5 minutes. I know with my wife in the car with me, she's not one of these people. When she starts seeing single digits, arriving at 9%, 8%, she starts getting a little freaked out. So just to help, I'll say, hey, you know what? The car says we're ready to go. We'll sit here 5 more minutes and get a couple more percentages to have a little buffer and things like that. So whatever you feel comfortable with, but know your car. Also plan for unexpected. Sure.
Sorry. And also just because at this point, we've really talked about, you got to do this, you got to do that, whatever. It's also very location dependent. Where we are kind of in the middle of the South, there's not a lot of charging infrastructure. But you go somewhere like the West Coast, East Coast, if you just look at a map of like charger infrastructure, you see it's an explosion all along the coast. So if you're doing a road trip, say you live in South Carolina and you're going up to New Jersey, you might not have to think as hard about your trip just because you have way more options.
Every 30 miles on I-95. Yep. So
Yep.
Yep.
So I just wanted to get that out there because so far it does sound like it's just a bear to travel, but it's really kind of
Yeah.
dependent. It kind of is a bear when you live in central Arkansas and you have a total
Yes.
of like 4 Electrify America State sites, within
Yes.
a 250-mile radius.
Yes. We're basing this experience on living in the South, and the South is not very friendly to superchargers, to supercharging station. We live in a state that has maybe, I think, 5 Tesla superchargers right now. I think 5 or 6. And you go to Atlanta, and there's 5 or 6 in just one side or one area of Atlanta. I mean, it's a struggle for us, and that's why we do these things on these trips. But if you're
Yep.
driving from New York to Philadelphia, you're not going to have that issue.
Yep.
So I'm very happy that you did bring that up. Also, plan for the unexpected. This is any road trip that you take. I mean, even if you're in a regular car, I like to carry a backpack that has, the little, can of inflated air in it. I carry a little air compressor with me that I plug it into my USB. Some tire patch kits. I always make sure I have the number for roadside assistance. Just plan for the unexpected. I also like to keep, just in case something weird happens for anyone, I throw a couple extra bottles of water in my trunk and a couple extra blankets, just in case, something happens and we're traveling in the wintertime and it's 20 degrees outside and we're stranded. I got some blankets and I got some water. Now the car will stay warm. Now I did notice this because you hear this whole thing about traveling and what happens if you get stuck, in a traffic jam for like multiple hours. What's going to happen to your efficiency? You're going to stall on the side of the road. So my last trip to South Carolina, we actually did get stuck outside of Atlanta, which we always get stuck outside of Atlanta. This was road construction and a wreck. So we actually had a detour out. So everyone had a detour off. So we were pretty much stuck for, I would say, not moving or moving at 1 mile per hour for about an hour and 15 minutes. And I used probably 1 to 2% of my energy. I mean, I think it was like 52. And by the time I got out of there, I was like at 50. So you're not using that much energy. You're not using that much power in your car just sitting there with the AC on. Very similar to a gas car. You're not using that much just sitting there running. So, people get scared of, what if I'm stuck in a snowstorm for 14 hours? Well, if you got enough charge on you, you're probably going to be okay. Now, if you got 5%, it's another story. But if you got enough charge on you, you're going to be okay. So don't think, hey, I drive an EV and I get stuck for 2 hours, something's going to happen and run out of energy. Someone has to tell me that's usually not the case if you have enough charge. What do you think about that, Sebastian?
Yeah, for sure. That's, I've seen the same thing, in my Bolt. I've had times where I've just been sitting, I had one day I was sitting outside, I mean, literally a quarter mile from my house for like an hour, just not moving. The gauge didn't even budge, sitting there with AC, blasting on me. So for sure, it's not as much of a power suck as you might think it is.
Yep. So I just had a buddy that, just today, he blew 2 tires on his car and he was waiting 4 hours for roadside service. And I said, what'd you do? He said, I watched 2 movies on Netflix in my Tesla.
Yep.
I mean, because that's what you can do. And he didn't lose any efficiency during that time, sitting on there waiting on roadside assistant to come in and tow him with his 2 bad tires. So yeah. And also, this is also for any road trip too. Know your alternate routes. Know that, hey, if there's something happens, I can hop on this highway, or hey, if I'm going through Atlanta or something's going on, I can take the bypass around Atlanta. I have never had, the only time I use alternate routes is if it tells me in the navigation. What's your experience been with using alternate routes, Sebastian?
Yeah, so I actually had a time where I should have listened to the navigation instead of being oh, well, I know a better way to get through Little Rock than what it's telling me. When we were coming back from Memphis, it was also the weekend they were adjusting the 6:30 traffic, and they had that entire section of the interstate shut down. Well, I was trying to get somewhere that was off of 6:30, and the GPS was like, "Oh, take 440 and come around and then come up that side." And I was like, "Well, that's stupid. Why would I do that?" Yeah, 100% should have listened. But mainly for me, the most important thing for the alternate routes, and it's kind of, again, we can't really do it where we live, but as you get into more populated areas that have more infrastructure, you can, is to kind of always have a backup charger in your mind. That way, if you pull up to an EA station and there's only one of 4 chargers working in a line of 7 people, you maybe have somewhere else you can go.
Yep.
We can't really do that like in Arkansas because you have the one option. There's not anything else for 60, 70 miles around. But it's still a good consideration as you kind of get further and further from home of, okay, so if this exit has a charger, but if it doesn't work, there's one 20 miles this way, 10 miles that way that I could, stretch to or whatever. So it's just good to always have an idea of what's around you, what's, your kind of other plan if something broke.
Yeah, and I had a little bit of that coming back from our road trip. It wanted me to stop in Birmingham at a pay to park. I mean, I'm not paying to park to and then pay to charge. That's where it told me to go. But I noticed that if I stopped before Alabama, if I stopped in Leeds and I charged there longer, I could skip that route and then skip that charger, and then it gets me up to my next charger. So you can kind of play that games too. A lot of times, when I put my destination in the navigation, sometimes I'll clear that out when I get to my supercharger. So even though I'm going from Charleston, South Carolina to Little Rock, Arkansas, and I put Little Rock, Arkansas, when I get to my first or second supercharger, I'll just type in, okay, now I'll type in, clear it out. Now I'll type in Little Rock, Arkansas. And it has changed, like, oh, we're going to have you charge here now instead of having you stop 4 times, we're going to stop you 6 times. And what I kind of did on my way back is a little bit different. Before, on our way there, we made sure if it told us to stop for 35 minutes, we stopped for 35 minutes. We just sat there. We had less stops. But on the way back, I said, let's do this. Let's have shorter stops. Let's have more stops with shorter stops. So instead of stopping every 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes, we stopped every hour and 15 minutes. But those stops are only 10 minutes. So enough time for us to get out, go to the bathroom, stretch our legs, get back in the car, another hour, 15, 20 minutes, another stop, get out, walk around. And time-wise, it's probably the same time-wise, but it just broke the trip up a little bit, especially with like me and you. We have kids. Sometimes kids, can't always, hold it for 2.5 hours. They got to go to the bathroom. So you got to get them out and got to get a walk. Someone's thirsty, stuff happens. So, just know your alternate routes, know your alternate chargers along the way. Another good thing, snacks. That is very important for any road trip that you take, especially if you're at a charger that there's nowhere to eat around. And there's several of those I know for Tesla now, not as much for CCS cars because those are usually at populated areas. But for Teslas, I know there's a couple in our general area that there are no places to eat at if you stop at. One was in Tupelo, Mississippi. If you're ever charging in Tupelo, Mississippi, you're in the back of a mall parking lot and there's nowhere to walk to. I mean, you can walk, but you're going to be walking across multiple highways to get to some. So everyone in that charging station was sitting there eating fast food while they were charging. So it's good to have snacks because you may stop at a supercharger and not get to eat. So have those snacks along with you and things like that. That's just good for any road trip. But I know for CCS cars, most of those chargers are in well-populated shopping centers. Have you ever had an incident where one was not, Sebastian?
Well, I mean, really, the main issue with kind of CCS right now is, Electrify America is probably one of the biggest players in the game, and they have a lot in Walmart parking lots, and Walmart's not open 24 hours anymore. So if you are driving at night and it's past that time where Walmart's closed, you're just sitting in a Walmart parking lot, right?
Yep.
You might be able to walk all the way across the parking lot and get to maybe a Taco Bell or a McDonald's or something close to it. But there's also, I think, for example, the Clarksville Walmart, where there's not really anything around it. And so you're just at the Walmart parking lot at night. You're the only one there type situation. And so then you probably don't want to get out of the car.
Yes. And those are the worst design spots to pull into too at Clarksville. They're tiny and you have to back into them. It's just a weird location. So that's what's like living in the South and having an electric vehicle. And also understand this. This is our last thing we're going to let you know. It's going to take longer than driving in a gasoline powered vehicle. If it says, if you hop in a car and it says 13 hours, you're going to have about, 3 stops, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Maybe you'll eat longer than that. It's not going to be that long. With EVs, that 13-hour stop could be 14 and a half, because your stops are going to be longer because it does take you longer to charge. We're not at the point yet where, we can, get out and charge for 10 minutes and leave. Hopefully we get to that in the future, but just understand that your stops are going to be longer if you're driving an EV. And most people who drive EVs kind of understand that. Any final parting words for our EV road trip tips and tricks, Sebastian?
Yeah. So just on that last, understand it'll take longer. To me, it's not a bad thing, right? Slow down, enjoy the journey type deal. If I can stop and plug in, it's like, cool, I'll actually go and eat somewhere instead of just grabbing something in a drive-through, shoving it in my face as I drive. I'll actually go sit down, whatever. Usually then you feel more relaxed, you feel more awake, you're more, when you get out and you start stretching, it's like, I'm less tired than I was when I stopped. So really, for me, it's a good thing. And it's also highly dependent on your car, because I drive a Chevy Bolt. It doesn't charge fast. But other people, like people who drive EV6s or Ioniq 5s, that, their longest charging stop, in theory, should be 20 minutes. 20 minutes is enough time to run into a fast food place, grab your food, whatever, run back out to the car type situation.
Yep.
For me, it's like I'm stopping for at least 30 to 45 minutes anytime we stop.
Yep.
And so that is go in, sit down, eat your meal, whatever, get back up, go back to your car.
Yeah.
But
2
for me, it's
bathroom
not a
breaks,
hit.
baby. Yeah.
But,
We are
for
no
me,
longer
and
at
you mentioned,
Yeah, we are no longer
having
at the
kids
age that we
is,
can drive 12 hours and stop 2 times. That's not happening
yeah,
anymore. So, yeah.
I do not have the iron butt to be able to just sit still for that long. I have to like move
No.
around, stretch my legs, like,
Yes.
and having kids too, like you mentioned, you're gonna stop anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're gonna stop, you might as well stop and be able to get some gas while just know that you're gonna basically get some charge while you're there, while you're
Yep.
changing diapers, or have a restless toddler who needs to go run around in some grass and wear themselves out a little bit.
Yes.
So
I will say this last road trip we did come back on one day, and it was 16 hours, and it was the recovery on that was brutal. I mean, my back was hurting, my hip was hurting, it took me a good day and a half to recover from that, because that's 16 hours in the car.
Yep.
20-year-old me could easily do that, no problem. But it's nice to get out, walk around, go to a Buc-ee's, take some pictures, get some beef jerky, get some fudge, experience all that. It's nice. It does force you to slow down. And that's the one thing nice. If you do have kids, it's nice just to enjoy the time with them. So,
yeah.
All right. We want to thank you all for joining us today. As always, you can check us out on YouTube. You can find us at the EV Geek Podcast. You can find Sebastian at Kilowatt Station. Both ways too. You can find us on X as well. Those two handles as well. Thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you on our next episode. So long, everyone.
See ya.